Now, at the halfway point through the 2023 season, we're going to talk about everything that we've learned about Kenny Dillingham's Sun Devils on this edition of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Wherever you're getting your content, make sure that you hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. You can stay in touch with that content by following me on Twitter. You can find me at RichieBrads36 and the podcast as well at LO_Sun Devils. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. There's been some hard lessons that we have learned this year for the Arizona State Sun Devils. There's been some highs and there's been some lows. It's the first year of the Kenny Dillingham era. It's a rebuild for the team. It's been difficult. We can call it as it is. But there have been lessons that we have learned. And that's what we're here to talk about on this edition of the podcast. We're going to talk about the main components that we've learned. I have three in particular that I am highlighting here, but I will be going into plenty of detail as we go through. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Look at the offensive side of the ball. And our first lesson here is that the offense is a work in progress. Not that this should be a surprise to anyone, but this is not going to be instant success for the team. And we've seen that so far. Right now, looking at the Sun Devils offense, they currently are second to last in the Pac-12 in yards per game with just 342 yards, 342.2 yards per game. For what it's worth, it's almost a 50-yard difference between us and last place, which, if you didn't know, was Utah. I would not have guessed that. Not that Utah's an offensive powerhouse, but that is crazy to see that drop off. But the Sun Devils really are just not a terrific team offensively. They are seventh in the conference with 258.5 yards per game through the air, and they are second to last in the conference in rushing yards per game at 83.7. Obviously, the Sun Devils are still quality in running the football, but we've obviously seen them start to run into some problems because of injuries, both to the offensive line and to the backfield. So I expect that to pick up a little bit. I would be really surprised if we ended up outside of the top 10 at least. And then we're dead last in points per game. Not a surprise, 18.7 points per game. It's obviously weighed down quite a bit by the shutout that they had against Fresno State, but even accounting for that, you're still looking at, like, I would guess like 21 points per game. Nothing too crazy. It's not a great offense whatsoever. And even outside of the statistics as a team, you're seeing individual guys have some struggles as well. You look at the quarterbacks, four quarterbacks have taken not significant, but a good amount of snaps. The lowest was Jacob Conover with 16 passing attempts. All but one quarterback has more touchdowns than interceptions. That quarterback is Jaden Rashada. He has only played 2 games this year before he was injured. Not ideal. As a team, they are completing 58.1% of their passes. Also keep in mind that Cameron Scadaboo has 4 passes that he's completed 3 of them. So I don't know how much that's like really adding when you only have 4 pass attempts, but it's there. You only have one quarterback that's completing over 60% of his passes. It's Trenton Bourguet. For what it's worth, it's 65.3%. Very, very good. But Jaden Rashada was 56.7, Drew Pine 53.1, Jacob Conover 37.5. You've seen them struggle. I mentioned the interceptions. You only have one guy, which was Rashada, straight to 1. The other guys, Trenton Bourguet is 1 touchdown to 2 interceptions. Drew Pine was 2 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Jacob Conover, 0 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. On the year, that's 6 to 8. There's been 22 sacks through 6 games, which I feel like that's kind of a win because you would think that with all the injuries that have been sustained on the offensive line that it would be a lot closer to like 30. I don't know. Like this is really not terrible. Plus, keep in mind Drew Pine has taken 11 of those sacks and he's played 2 or 3 games. That's not as bad as it could be. Now, don't get me wrong, there's been a lot of pressure. There's been a lot of knockdowns and all the other statistics that you can look at when it comes to offensive line play. It's not been great, but it has also not been the worst unit on the team. It truly hasn't. Like, they've done an admirable job, all things considered. Have to tip your hat and give them credit for what they've been able to do. The run game, we talked about it. They're not doing great right now. In fact, they're only averaging 2.7 yards per carry on the ground. And I know that a lot of that has to do with the 49 yards lost by Drew Pine from the sacks, but it's still not good. They have 7 touchdowns. I think that's fine. 5 from Scadaboo, two from Bourget. You take it, is what it is. Receiving, you've definitely had pretty quality guys going on. Obviously, Elijah Badger has been the main guy there, leading the team by quite a bit in both receptions and yards. 33 receptions, 422 yards, and he has scored 2 touchdowns, which is tied for the team lead with Troy O'Mary, of all guys. But the next closest guy in terms of receiving yards is Cameron Scadaboo with just 245. And then the next closest guy in receptions is Xavier Guillory with 18. So there's a 15 catch difference between first and second, and nearly a 200-yard difference between first and second. You're seeing good success from Elijah Badger. The rest of the guys are really catching up. And one of the bigger surprises of the year has been Jalen Conyers and the lack of production that he has had. He only had 1 target this past weekend. He's missed a game. He has sat out for half of a game. He has not been the major component of the team that many of us were predicting. And, I was one of the bigger people that was hyping him up. Like I talked about him constantly over the summer. It's been a very big surprise to see the lack of impact that he has had on the year. And it's definitely affected the quarterbacks. I think that if you have Jalen Conyers playing at full strength, you're looking at a different situation. But this all goes into showing that this was not going to be immediate success. For what it's worth, the first 3 games of the year, Bo Baldwin was calling the plays. I won't say solely, because I know that Kenny Dillingham still had some play calling that he was doing, but Bo Baldwin was one of the main guys that was calling plays, if not like entirely calling those games over the first 3. And then after him, it started to pick up. It started going a little bit. You've seen ASU really start to figure some stuff out offensively. They put up a season high 28 points on USC. They were neck and neck that whole game. They had a close game with Cal. They had a close game with Colorado. But there's been a lot of bumps in the road. There's been a lot of adjustment for this team. You look at the overall product that you've had here. There's some good things to build off of, but there's also a lot of work that needs to be done. That's kind of where you sit with the offense. This is a work in progress. You've seen them get better each week. You really have. Like it's progressively starting to get a little more comfortable for the play calling and everything. Another big problem is obviously the quarterback injuries. Like going through 4 different quarterbacks is always going to really set you back. And you have to wonder if like Jaden Rashado had been able to play all 6 games and been completely healthy, where you're sitting at offensively, or even if you just had one guy, right? If you had Drew Pine or if you had Trenton Bourget, you wonder where you're at. You wonder if this is a team that is going to be playing better football, or if they're still going to have these highs and lows, these peaks and valleys, these great plays and these terrible plays. Probably closer to the latter, but it keeps you wondering, right? Bottom line here, though, is they're figuring it out. The week 6 offense is so much better than the week 1 offense that we have seen for the Sun Devils. And that's really all that matters right now. You just want to see that they're trending in the right direction. And as long as they're doing that and they're not treading water and not finding anywhere to grow and get better as a unit, that's where you start to have your concerns and your worries and stuff like that. But right now, I think that you have to be happy with where you're at. But again, remember, this is a team that is a work in progress. Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the most fun that I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You can select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. Seriously, it's just like an over-under. You can find Saquon Barkley for more than 60 rushing yards and Patrick Mahomes for more than 2 passing touchdowns. You can find Justin Jefferson for over under 100 yards, Lamar Jackson for 1 or more passing touchdowns. With PrizePicks reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For NFL games and college football top 25 matchups, you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second half. The player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, I've done this plenty of times, picking my over-unders, and it's so simple. It's a really easy interface, and you can do it in minutes. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for your first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Also want to talk to you about our friends over at Game Time because, look, we all know how stressful it can be to try and get tickets for your favorite sporting event, your concert at the last second. It happens to the best of us. But with with Game Time, you don't have to worry about that. You can get last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals. It's easy to find. Buy your tickets for any event in your area with a view from your seats at the venue. And of course, a lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and more. Speaking of that low price guaranteed, if you find any tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you up to 110% of the difference. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. All you have to do is download the Game Time app and create an account and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. If you guys haven't had a chance to check out the Locked On College kickoff every Friday, you should definitely check it out. Locked On College will go live 11 a.m. on every Locked On College YouTube channel. College Football Kickoff Live will cover playoff implications, conference rivalry games, and go in-depth like only Locked On can, including insight and analysis from our stable of Locked On College hosts covering their team every day. Find Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern or on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You won't want to miss it. Back into our conversation now, taking a look at the defensive side of the football. And I think this is a very simple lesson that we've learned, a very simple conclusion that we've come to. If you guys have been listening to this podcast, you know where I'm going. Brian Ward is the truth. He is that guy, pal. He is Himothy. He is Himmy Turner. Anything else that you can come up with. He's legit. They have turned this defense around so quickly. You were talking about one of the worst defenses in the entire conference last year. They were, looking at it, they were 7th in total yards because they were a decent pass defense. They were a really bad run defense, and they were not a great scoring defense either. But look at the change that you've seen this year. you're looking at the Sun Devils as the number 5 defense in total yards per game, the number 4 defense in passing yards per game. By the way, the total yards per game is 339.3. That's pretty darn good. Passing yards per game, you're looking at 217. That's also very, very good. Rushing defense is mediocre. They sit at 7th in the conference with 122.3 rushing yards per game. Definitely room to grow there. And then the points per game, I feel like it's very inflated. It's 28.3 points per game. When I say inflated, don't get me wrong, it's pretty consistent on what teams are putting up against you. But you also have to take the circumstances into account and remember that this is an offense that's not been doing their defense very many favors. They're leaving them out there. They're having those short drives that put the defense out and they get tired, they get exhausted. It's not been easy for this defense. And naturally, that fatigue adds up and it leads to points. But you take a look at the product as a whole for this team. They are doing so many good things. One of the biggest differences that we're seeing is in the pass rush. Last year, I tweeted this out. The Sun Devils as a whole had 17 sacks in 12 games last year. They were not doing anything. 4 players tied for the team lead in sacks, and that was only 2.5. 2.5 sacks was your team lead. 4 guys had it. That's so bad. That is so bad. But through 6 games, they've already surpassed that. They have 18 sacks this year. They've got 2 sack machines right now. Prince Dorbah, who's been one of the biggest surprises on this team. He's been an absolute rock star for them. 6 sacks, 56 yards for loss. So he's averaging almost 10 yards per sack. BJ Green, also very, very good. 4 sacks on the year. He's been bringing the quarterback down multiple times. I'd love to see how many half sacks he has because he's constantly getting there. And I think he was short of the sack against Shadir Sanders. So in my book, he has 5 sacks, only 28 yards compared to what Dorbah had. So, a flat 7 yards per loss that he's getting. The defensive backs are getting involved. Ro Torrance has 2 sacks. Shamari Simmons has a sack. Josiah Cox has been into the backfield as well. Like, they're dialing it up with the blitzes. They're very exotic. They're very creative in the ways they're getting back there. The linebackers are getting involved. Caleb McCullough has a sack. Travion Brown has gotten in for a half sack. The depth is there. Deshaun Mallory from the interior of the line has a sack and a half. Anthony Cooper's gotten there for a half. Clayton Smith has gotten there for a half. They're getting so many guys to produce. And while you do have your Prince Dorbahs and your BJ Greens at the top of the list, you still have had so many guys be able to get into the backfield. That's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 players have at least a half sack for the Sun Devils. You're getting back there. You're disrupting the offense, creating pressure. One of the biggest things that Brian Ward said during the offseason in an interview with me, talking about the goals that he had for this defense, he said, we pretty much go every year hoping for 40 sacks, and I think he said 32 turnovers. He might have said 20 turnovers. He said, that's pretty much my margin that I look for success. So far, he is on pace for 36 sacks. That's got to be towards the top in all of college football. I would imagine that's top 50 at least, maybe higher. I have not looked at the wide scope of the entire nation. That would be pretty good. 36 sacks would be very good. The only bummer is they only have 1 turnover. It was a fumbled snap between a handoff from Caleb Williams and I think it was Marshawn Lloyd, but they were able to fall on it. That's great. That's your only turnover, is a fumble recovery on a bad snap. No interceptions, no strip sacks, anything like that. So not even going to come close to 20 turnovers, let alone 30. I can't remember if he said 30 or 20, but you're not going to have the turnovers this year, which is a bummer, but it is what it is. There's still a lot to build off of here. The pass rush just completely rejuvenated. To see where you're at now compared to where you were at a year ago, mind-blowingly different. This is just a whole new team. And I mean, you've got a lot of guys that are returning too. BJ Green was there last year. Anthony Cooper was there last year. Michael Matus, no, he had his ACL torn, so he wasn't there. You got guys that were on this team last year that are finding at least equal success, if not better success. Like BJ Green is turning into a sack machine. 4 sacks on the year. Remember, his career high is 5, and he really did not get very much action his freshman year when he put up 5. He's going to flirt with 10 sacks this year. Prince Dorbah, I would be willing to bet, is going to get 10 sacks this year. They're doing so many good things right now. You have to be really happy with what they've been able to accomplish, what they've been able to figure out, the way they've gelled. There's so many good things here for the Sun Devils defense, and it just brings me to my point once again that Brian Ward is just so smart. He knows what he's doing. He knows the intricacies of how to get these guys to play at the highest level. It makes you worry whether or not he's going to be poached this offseason or next offseason or whenever by another college football team that's looking for a head coach. That's my only worry because he's doing such a good job with the Sun Devils defense. There's talent here, but he's getting the most out of these guys. What he's doing is phenomenal. And compared to what we've been seeing from this defense the last couple of years, let alone last year, this is a big time difference. He's the real deal, guys. Want to talk to you about our friends over at Jace Medical. Everyone should be empowered to take care of themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jace Medical offers the Jace Case. The Jace Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Case makes sure that you have medication in hand. Jace Case is simple. They handle everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. So don't get caught unprepared. Get $20 off on these life-saving antibiotics from Jace Medical by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to get $20 off of your order. Wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. Even though we're on a bye week, we still have a lot of content to be going over. So make sure that you guys are tuned in so that we keep you up to date on everything that's going on. The final lesson that we have learned from the Sun Devils, this is not an easy season. This is year 0 of a rebuild. This is going to take some time. Do not be surprised if they don't win another game this year. Seriously. I mean that wholeheartedly. And it's not indicative of bad coaching. It's not indicative of a lack of talent. It's a culmination of things. It's figuring things out. We talked about the offense and how it's not been a great unit. They're figuring a lot of things out. They're still getting to a point where they're a really good team. It's going to take time. Rome wasn't built in a day. That's what the classic phrase is, right? Look at the defense. They're doing a really good job, but they're still giving up points. They're not a great run defense team. They're figuring things out there too. Overall, the coaching still meshing together. We're still figuring out Kenny Dillingham's vision. We're figuring out Bo Baldwin's contributions to the team. We're figuring out Brian Ward's contributions to the team and the rest of the assistant coaches. Rashad Samples, Brian Carrington, Saga Tuttle, all those guys. What are they going to be figuring out? This is where we're at. There's a lot of figuring out that this team has to do. But they're 1-5 right now. It's honestly probably expected. You know, I came into this year very optimistic and said 6-6. They're not going to sniff that. They're just not. Their schedule in the second half is as brutal, if not more brutal than the first. It's definitely more brutal. Upcoming is 5 ranked opponents. At Washington, home versus Wazoo. At Utah, at UCLA, home versus Oregon, and home versus U of A. 5 ranked opponents right now. End of the year is the Territorial Cup. I think if you can come away with a win against Arizona, you can call this a successful season. If you can get an upset somewhere in there, like a UCLA or a Wazoo, also great. Just don't expect it. This is going to be a very difficult season for the Sun Devils to endure. And not just the Sun Devils, but the fans as well. We all know it's not easy to spend your hard-earned cash, go to this game, and watch the Sun Devils just put together a bad performance. Totally understand. It's not an easy thing to want to do, but we're doing it. We have had back-to-back sellout crowds at Mountain America Stadium. That is such a win and such a testament to the way that we are buying into this football program. For a one-win team and to have back-to-back sellout crowds is phenomenal. And yes, I understand that you sold out for USC and you sold out for Colorado. Totally get it. Probably not going to happen for Washington State, right? You got to take your wins where you can get them. And the Sun Devils have been able to string together a handful of wins right now. Not in the box score, not in the win column, but they are winning by activating the Valley, as Kenny Dillingham put it best. Everyone's buying in, and that is so important for the progression of this team. Hats off and a major shout out to all of you that are going out to the games and supporting this team. They need you more than ever. But just remember that this is year 0 of a rebuild, and they are very much behind the 8 ball. And this season's not getting easier. Again, you seriously might not win another game this year. If you guys are able to come to that conclusion and still find a way to support the team, then you're the real MVPs. You guys, as the fans, are the ones who deserve a lot of recognition as well. Not just the players, not just the coaches. The fans deserve recognition for the way that you guys have bought in. It's been amazing to go up into the press box and see so many people, see the student section that's full, see all the longtime fans and all the season ticket holders that are keeping the faith in this team no matter how difficult it's been. But it's just so important to remember we're in year 0. Brighter days are ahead. But right now, we're stuck in a really difficult spot. And it's okay to want to give up on this team. It's okay. But just remember that your support is going to be getting them to that next step. Hopefully you guys are learning this. Hopefully you guys have learned all of these lessons that I have learned. And if there's something else that you guys have taken away from this season, let me know in the comments. You can also hit me up on Twitter at Richie Bradshaw36 and the podcast as well at LO_Sun Devils. But that's all that I have for you guys on today's edition of the podcast. Thanks again, as always, for tuning in. Wherever you get your podcast, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. I will see you guys tomorrow for another edition of the pod. Till then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On.